Let me hit you with the truth right out of the gate. If someone with an avoidant attachment style suddenly ghosts you, stops responding, blocks you, or shuts down completely with zero explanation, you're not in a waiting room, you're in a permanent exit. And the sooner you realize that, the sooner you'll stop standing in a doorway they already walked out of. I know this is hard. I know the silence feels like torture, but you're not crazy. You're not overthinking. You're dealing with someone whose emotional system is wired to escape when intimacy feels threatening, and they're not coming back just because you still care. Now, you need to stick with me to the end of this, because what I'm about to break down could literally save you years of waiting, questioning, and blaming yourself for something that was never in your control. We're going deep into the psychology behind their behavior, the one move that seals the deal forever, and how to emotionally protect yourself so you stop reopening wounds that won't heal. There's a brutal truth we all have to face when we're dealing with someone who has an avoidant attachment style. They are not built to stick around for emotionally intense conversations. They are not wired to seek closure, understanding, or mutual resolution. They are wired for distance. The moment things get too real, too vulnerable, too emotionally demanding, they disconnect. And if you don't understand that about them, you will waste so much of your time trying to get answers from a wall that was built long before you even met them. Avoidants don't sit with discomfort, they escape it. You might think that someone who cares would at least want to talk, that they'd want to understand what went wrong, that they'd want to clarify, close the loop, make peace. That's how you operate. That's how secure people operate. But an avoidant sees that same conversation as a trap. They view emotional closeness as a threat to their autonomy, to their sense of control, and to their internal equilibrium. So instead of leaning in, they pull back. Instead of communicating, they shut down. And instead of asking, "How can we fix this?" they say, "How fast can I disappear?" Here's what happens. You get into a moment that matters. Maybe there's conflict or a misunderstanding. Maybe you ask for more closeness, more time, more depth. That triggers something deep inside them. Not because what you said was wrong, but because the intensity of the moment collides with an old belief they've been carrying their whole life, that closeness equals danger, that love means pressure, that being emotionally available will get them hurt, and the fastest way they know to protect themselves is to shut the whole system down. They don't ghost because they're cruel. They ghost because they've been trained, often through years of emotional neglect or pain, to believe that love comes with loss of control, and rather than lose control, they'd rather lose you, so they cut communication. They stop texting back. They get cold, they act like nothing happened, or like you imagined everything, and this is the most painful part. They make you feel like you're the one who's too much, like you were the problem. But you weren't, you were just trying to connect, and they didn't know how to stay when things got close. Avoidants are experts at keeping people at arm's length. That's their comfort zone. They prefer relationships that live in the shallow end, because once they move into deeper emotional waters, their inner alarm system starts screaming. That's when they start looking for eggs. It's not because they don't feel anything, but because the feelings are too intense for them to process in real time. Now here's what's really hard to accept. You can pour your heart out. You can send the perfect message. You can write something honest, raw, emotional, hoping it'll reach them, hoping they'll respond, but they won't, not because they don't see it, but because the very act of receiving it confirms their worst fear, that being close to someone means emotional responsibility, and avoidants run from that responsibility like it's fire. It's not rejection of you, it's a rejection of what you represent, emotional accountability. And when they run, they don't just leave the relationship, they leave the conversation, they leave the history, they leave the potential, they leave the truth. So while you're sitting there overanalyzing, replaying, trying to find the perfect way to reach them, They're already miles ahead, not necessarily happy, but disconnected enough to feel safe again. That's their win. It's not growth, it's not maturity, it's not peace, it's just less intensity. That's their goal, and this is why chasing closure with an avoidant is an exercise in pain. You want resolution, but they want regulation. You want clarity, but they want distance. You want the truth, but they want silence because silence feels safer than exposing themselves to emotional reality. Avoidants don't chase closure. That would mean turning toward discomfort. That would mean making themselves vulnerable. That would mean admitting that maybe they left too soon, or that maybe they felt something real. And they're not ready to do that, not now, maybe not ever. So they choose the easier path, the path of disappearing, of pretending it never mattered, of building emotional walls so high that even they can't climb back over them. And the hardest part, they leave you in the rubble, searching for meaning in a place they've already abandoned. When someone cuts you off without warning, without explanation, without even a shred of closure, your instinct is to assume they're confused, hurting, figuring things out. You tell yourself they just need time. You convince yourself this is temporary, that this silence is just a pause, not the end. But when you're dealing with someone who is emotionally avoidant, you have to face the truth. Going silent isn't a phase. It's a decision. It's a fully calculated way for them to regulate discomfort by removing the thing that triggers it. In this case, that thing is you. And I know how brutal that sounds, but it's the truth that no one wants to admit. People who love you don't vanish when it gets hard. They don't evaporate into thin air just because the emotional temperature rises. Avoidants do, because they've been conditioned to believe that separation equals safety. When things start to feel too intimate, too serious, too emotionally demanding, their system interprets it as danger. And when a person like that goes radio silent, stops replying, blocks you, or creates total distance, it's not a glitch. It's not time to think. It's a system reboot, a choice to sever connection and find peace through detachment. They are not in a confused state of mind. They are in a protective state. You might be looking at their silence and trying to decode it, but for them, silence is the message. They've convinced themselves that cutting you off is not only necessary, but justified. They tell themselves it's healthier this way, that disappearing is kinder than confrontation, that not talking is safer than opening up. And once they've made that decision, they rarely go back on it. Because doing so would require them to re-enter an emotional space that makes them feel completely out of control. It would mean being accountable. It would mean being vulnerable. And avoidants are not built for emotional vulnerability. They are built for distance, and the moment things get close enough to trigger their internal alarms, they act. That action, the total shutoff, is not a hesitation. It's a full body response to what they perceive as emotional threat. You might still be checking your phone, hoping they'll reach out. You might think they're taking a few days to calm down. You might even believe that space will help them come to their senses, but they're not counting days. They're not planning to re-engage. In their world, walking away without a word is closure. It's how they avoid discomfort, avoid accountability, avoid the mirror you held up to them. So when they cut off contact completely, no texting, no liking your posts, no watching your stories, no checking in, they're not in limbo, they're done, and they've likely told themselves a story to justify it that makes it easier to sleep at night. Avoidant individuals don't need a huge blowout or a dramatic betrayal to pull away. All it takes is a moment, one emotional spike, one conversation that feels too vulnerable, one expression of need that registers as pressure, and suddenly they're gone. Not always physically, not always right away, but emotionally, they've already started detaching. The second they feel emotionally unsafe, their brain flips a switch and everything shifts. What was once exciting now feels overwhelming. What once felt like closeness now feels like a trap, and to make it easier to leave, they begin rewriting the story in their own mind. They can't leave someone they care about without a reason, so they create one. It might be subtle at first, a few judgments, a few exaggerated flaws. They start to focus on what's wrong instead of what's right. They tell themselves you're too intense, too emotional, too needy, too much. And they start painting the relationship in a negative light, not because it actually became toxic, but because that makes their exit easier to justify. The rewriting of the story gives them distance. It gives them a sense of control. It gives them emotional permission to detach without guilt. This shift isn't always visible to you. On the outside, everything might seem fine. They're texting, showing up, laughing. But internally, the withdrawal has already begun, and because they don't express what's really going on, you're left in the dark, confused, questioning your own instincts. You can feel the energy change, but when you ask what's wrong, they deny it or shut down further. That's not a mistake, that's a defense mechanism. They're trying to convince themselves that walking away is the only way to feel safe again. And rewriting the story is how they rationalize leaving someone they still have feelings for. They don't want to process emotions, they want to avoid them. They want to shut the door before it gets too painful. And if that means twisting the narrative so that you become the reason for the distance, they'll do it not out of cruelty, but out of fear of closeness, of being seen, of losing the control that emotional connection seems to threaten. One of the biggest reasons people stay stuck is because they're waiting for permission, permission to grow, permission to pivot, permission to want something different than what they were taught. But here's the truth. No one is going to fully understand your journey, and they don't need to. Stop wasting energy trying to explain yourself to people who aren't even living the kind of life you want. Not everyone is meant to get it. Not everyone is meant to support you. And that's not a problem. It's a sign you're doing something bold, something personal, something that doesn't fit inside the neat little box someone else built for you. Every time you try to make your dream digestible for someone else, you dilute it, you shrink it, you reshape it into something safer, smaller, more acceptable. But you weren't born to be understood. You were born to be real. You were born to evolve, to take up space, to break patterns, and that kind of growth, it confuses people. It makes them uncomfortable, especially the ones who are too afraid to make changes in their own life. When you start rising, it reflects everything they're not doing, so don't expect them to cheer, don't expect them to clap, expect resistance, expect silence, expect misunderstanding, and then keep going anyway. Because your journey is yours. The late nights, the early mornings, the tears you don't talk about, the wins no one sees. None of it needs validation to matter. And the more you try to explain yourself, the more distracted you become. You start justifying decisions that were never theirs to approve in the first place. You start questioning your path not because it's wrong, but because someone else couldn't see what you saw. Let them be confused. Let them talk. Let them walk away. That's not your burden to carry. Your only job is to stay aligned with your vision and your truth. The right people will feel it. The right opportunities will find you. The clarity will come, but only when you stop asking for everyone to come with you. Sometimes growth looks like distance. Sometimes it looks like doing things alone. Sometimes it looks like silence when you're surrounded by noise. But none of that means you're lost. It means you're finally choosing yourself. You don't need to be liked. You need to be respected, and respect starts with you respecting your own journey, whether anyone gets it or not. You can say all the right things. You can dress the part, post the right quotes, and speak with confidence. But if your energy doesn't match your words, people feel it. That's the part you can't fake. Energy is raw, it's real. It enters a room before you do and lingers long after you leave. And the crazy thing is, most people don't even realize they're leaking their power through the energy they carry. If you're desperate, it shows. If you're insecure, it hums underneath everything you say. If you're angry, it spills out no matter how hard you try to smile through it. But when you're calm, grounded, focused, that kind of energy shifts everything around you without you needing to speak at all. You don't need to chase attention when your energy commands presence. You don't need to explain your worth when your energy reflects it. And you don't need to argue with people about who you are when your energy speaks for itself. That's why focusing on yourself in silence is so powerful. Because when you're doing the inner work, when you're building discipline, healing your patterns, honoring your boundaries, that growth creates a frequency that can't be ignored. People might not understand what's different about you, but they'll feel it. They'll notice the way you carry yourself, the peace in your eyes, the way you no longer entertain chaos, drama, or meaningless conversations. That's what real power looks like, when you've done enough work that you no longer need to prove a thing. Think about the people who inspire you the most. It's not what they say, it's how they show up. You respect them because they're authentic. They don't try too hard, they're not performing, they just move with intention, they radiate clarity, and that kind of energy only comes when you've been through the fire and come out stronger. It comes from silence, from self-awareness, from choosing growth instead of validation. Energy never lies. That's why it's more important to align your life than it is to advertise it. You don't need to announce every move. You don't need to explain your process. You just need to do the work, quietly, consistently, and let your energy do the talking. Because when your energy is right, you don't have to force things. The right people, the right situations, and the right outcomes are drawn to you, not because of what you say, but because of who you've become. Most people are holding on so tight they don't even realize they're the ones blocking their own blessings. Trying to control how things happen when they happen, who shows up, who leaves, what the timeline looks like, it's exhausting, and it's not working. You know why? Because control is fear in disguise. It's fear of failure, fear of uncertainty, fear that if you stop micromanaging everything, your life will fall apart. But here's the truth most people avoid. The tighter you hold on, the more resistance you create. And the more resistance you create, the harder it becomes to move forward. Sometimes the only thing standing between you and your breakthrough is your obsession with how it should go. Letting go doesn't mean giving up. It means loosening your grip on outcomes so you can actually live. It means trusting yourself enough to know that whatever happens, you'll handle it, that your worth isn't tied to control, that your peace isn't something you bargain with. You cannot create space for new things if you're clinging to what's already gone. You can't attract the right people if you're still chasing the wrong ones. And you can't move forward if your head is stuck in trying to rewrite the past. When you finally decide to let go, even just a little, you create room for something bigger than your plan. You create room for alignment, for flow, for opportunities you couldn't have predicted if you tried. Because life doesn't respond to force. It responds to clarity. When you stop controlling everything, you start seeing clearly. You start trusting your gut. You stop overthinking every move and start taking action. And suddenly, you're not chasing anything. You're becoming someone. You're creating momentum, not because you have it all figured out, but because you're finally letting life work with you instead of against you. It's scary, I know. Letting go feels vulnerable. It feels like surrender. But what you're really doing is making space for your strength to show up. You're saying, I don't know exactly how this will play out, but I'm done pretending I have to control it all. And that shift, that quiet internal release is what opens the door. That's when people start showing up. That's when solutions appear. That's when you feel lighter, sharper, more in tune. Not because the world changed, but because you did. You stopped gripping. You started trusting. And that's when everything around you finally starts to fall into place. Look, this journey isn't for the faint of heart. Focusing on yourself in a world that constantly pulls at your attention is hard. Choosing silence when your ego wants to scream is uncomfortable. Letting go of control when your brain craves certainty feels terrifying. But that's exactly why it works. Because the moment you decide to shift inward, to stop chasing people, to stop needing validation, to stop explaining yourself to those who were never meant to understand, you step into a version of yourself that's grounded, unshakable, and powerful beyond words. Everything starts to fall into place, not because life suddenly gets easier, but because you stop getting in your own way. You stop forcing, reacting, pleasing, performing. You become the kind of person who leads without noise, who inspires without trying, who attracts peace, opportunities, and growth just by being aligned. So if you're tired of feeling stuck, if you're sick of the noise, the chaos, the comparison, go quiet. Go inward, build in silence, heal in private, focus on becoming, and then watch what happens. Watch how fast things shift. Watch how the right people start to appear. Watch how your path begins to clear. Because when you finally focus on yourself and stay silent long enough to hear your own truth, everything aligns. Now go. You don't need applause. You need action, and this, right here, is your starting line.